Welcome back to the channel, coin collectors and treasure hunters. Today, we're uncovering two of the rarest and most valuable United States Washington quarter dollar coins that could be hiding in everyday pocket change. One of these coins might be worth far more than its face value, so stay with us until the end. You won't want to miss these incredible discoveries. Frist Coin 1999 Philadelphia Mint Susan B. Anthony Dollar, identifiable by the P mint mark near the shoulder, may look like an ordinary final chapter in a coin series that most people stopped noticing years ago, but its story begins with a much bigger idea. The Susan B. Anthony dollar was created to put a smaller, more practical dollar coin into American commerce, while honoring one of the nation's most influential advocates for women's voting rights. By 1999, the design was already familiar, yet the Philadelphia Mint was producing what would become the final regular issue Susan B. Anthony dollars before the denomination was revived in a completely different form. That makes this date especially interesting because it sits at the end of an era, and sometimes the final coins of a series become more fascinating long after they disappear from everyday transactions. The 1999 issue has a distinctive appearance that can reveal much more than its date alone. Susan B. Anthony faces right on the obverse, surrounded by liberty, in God we trust, and the date, while the small P mint mark identifies Philadelphia production. Flip the coin over, and the familiar Apollo 11-inspired eagle design dominates the reverse, with the eagle descending toward the lunar surface while Earth appears in the distance. The coin's copper-nickel-clad construction gives it a silvery appearance, but under different lighting, wear, cleaning, or environmental exposure can make individual pieces appear dramatically different. A sharp example can show surprisingly crisp lettering and details, while heavily circulated specimens may display dull surfaces, flattened high points, and small marks accumulated from years of handling. What makes the 1999 Philadelphia dollar especially compelling is the timing of its production. The Susan B. Anthony dollar had struggled to gain widespread acceptance after its introduction in 1979, partly because its small size and appearance could be confused with the quarter. Production eventually stopped after 1981, although some additional coins were struck in 1999 to meet a renewed demand for dollar coins. That one-year return transformed the 1999 issue into the final regular production chapter of the Susan B. Anthony dollar series. For collectors, that historical position matters. You are not simply looking at another dated coin. You are looking at a coin produced when the mint briefly brought back a design that had already seemed destined for the past. Now imagine finding one in a forgotten jar of change, an old drawer, a family collection, or a box of inherited coins. At first glance, there may be nothing dramatic about it. The surfaces might show ordinary contact marks, the edge might look completely normal, and the date might seem like nothing more than 1999. But this is where careful observation separates an interesting coin from a potentially important one. Look closely at the lettering, especially the date and inscriptions, and examine whether any apparent doubling has genuine characteristics consistent with a minting error rather than simple machine doubling, shadows, scratches, or damage. Genuine varieties and errors can attract collectors, but they must be identified correctly before anyone can responsibly attach a premium to them. The rim deserves equal attention. Run your eyes around the entire circumference and look for unusual weakness, abnormal thickness, flattening, splits, or irregular metal movement. A normal rim should have a coherent shape consistent with the manufacturing process, while a genuine striking problem can sometimes create an unusual appearance that deserves further investigation. Also study the relationship between the obverse and reverse designs. If the strike appears dramatically misaligned, that could become more interesting, but minor visual differences are not automatically valuable errors. Coins are struck at enormous scale, and ordinary production characteristics can easily be mistaken for rare mistakes when viewed without proper numismatic knowledge. Weight can provide another important clue, but it should never be treated as proof by itself. A 1999 Susan B. Anthony dollar has a standard specifications framework, and a meaningful deviation from expected weight may justify closer examination. However, dirt, wear, damage, altered surfaces, scale accuracy, and other factors can affect measurements. If a coin seems unusually light or heavy, weigh it on a reliable precision scale and compare the result with trusted specifications. Then examine the edge and surfaces for signs that the coin may have been altered. A surprising weight difference can create excitement, but responsible collectors know that excitement is only the beginning of the investigation. Metal color can also be deceptive. The normal copper-nickel clad construction gives the coin its familiar pale silver appearance, yet environmental exposure can produce darker tones, yellowish hues, reddish patches, or uneven coloration. Artificial tunning, cleaning, chemical exposure, and surface damage can create appearances that look extraordinary under certain lighting. That is why a strange color should never automatically be called a rare composition error. If the color appears dramatically different, inspect the edge for evidence of the underlying clad layers and avoid polishing or scraping the coin. Once a coin is altered, even unintentionally, its collector appeal can be reduced. The same caution applies to apparent doubled lettering. A bold second image beside a letter can make a collector's heart race, but not every doubled-looking mark represents a doubled die. Some apparent doubling comes from the striking process, die deterioration, mechanical movement, postmint damage, or the way light reflects from a worn surface. A genuine variety requires careful comparison and authentication against known characteristics. If your 1999 Philadelphia Susan B. Anthony dollar shows unusual doubling, photograph it under controlled lighting, preserve the coin in its current condition, and have the feature examined by a knowledgeable numismatist or professional grading and authentication service, rather than attempting to modify the coin yourself. And then comes the question that makes every discovery story irresistible. What could one of these unusual coins actually be worth? The answer depends enormously on condition, authenticity, rarity, demand, and the exact nature of any error or variety. As an illustrative storytelling ladder rather than a promise of value. Imagine a minor but legitimate variation attracting a hypothetical outcome somewhere around $2,500 to $3,500 in a specialized collector market. A more notable authenticated example could be imagined around $9,000, while a truly high-grade coin might enter a hypothetical $5,000 discussion. These figures are not standard prices for ordinary 1999 Susan B. Anthony dollars, and they should never be interpreted as guaranteed values. They simply illustrate how dramatically the market can change when rarity and collector demand intersect. Climb another step, and the possibilities become even more dramatic. An unusual, professionally authenticated mint anomaly might be discussed in an illustrative scenario around $6,000, while a rare collector piece could reach a hypothetical $7,500 level. An exceptionally preserved or genuinely uncommon example might be imagined around $8,000, and an unusual discovery backed by strong collector demand could approach an illustrative $8,500. In an extraordinary or historically significant case, a hypothetical outcome might even reach $9,000. But the critical point is that these numbers are storytelling examples, never guarantees, and certainly not what an ordinary circulated 1999 P. Susan B. Anthony dollar should be expected to sell for. Actual market results require evidence, authentication, condition assessment, and a real buyer willing to pay the price. That distinction is incredibly important because it protects collectors from one of the biggest dangers in modern coin hunting: confusing possibility with certainty. A coin worth a few dollars can look spectacular under magnification, while a genuinely scarce error can look almost unimpressive until an expert explains what makes it different. Imagine discovering such a piece in a container that had been sitting untouched for decades. A legitimate high-value discovery could feel like a sudden windfall, perhaps even resembling the financial impact of a down payment on a home, but only after the coin survives professional examination and enters a competitive market. The emotional moment of discovery is priceless, yet the financial value must always be established by evidence rather than excitement. So before you rush to sell, slow down and examine the coin responsibly. Confirm the 1999 date and the Philadelphia P mint mark. Inspect both sides under magnification. Study the rim. Check the strike alignment. Record the weight using a reliable scale. Observe the metal color without cleaning the surface, and photograph any suspected doubling or mint anomaly. Never scratch the coin, never polish it, and never try to make an unusual feature more visible by altering the surface. Compare your observations with reputable references, consult experienced numismatists, and consider professional authentication when the evidence genuinely suggests something unusual. The most valuable part of coin hunting is not simply finding a strange-looking coin. It is proving exactly what you found. And that is what makes the 1999 Philadelphia Susan B. Anthony dollar such a fascinating final chapter. Millions of ordinary-looking coins can exist, yet the possibility of an unusual survivor keeps collectors searching through places everyone else ignores. Somewhere in a forgotten collection, an old bank roll, a jar of change, or a family box, a coin may be waiting for someone patient enough to notice the detail that everyone else missed. The real question is not whether every 1999 P dollar is a hidden fortune. It absolutely is not. But whether the next one you examine could contain an authentic feature that changes its story completely. Because just when you think you have seen every surprise American coinage can offer, the next coin may reveal an error so unexpected that it turns an ordinary piece of pocket change into a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. And that shocking coin is the one we are hunting for next. Second coin 1979, Susan B. Anthony dollar coin featuring a profile of the women's rights leader, begins its story at a remarkable moment in American history, when the United States Mint attempted something ambitious, putting a small, modern dollar coin back into everyday circulation after decades in which Americans had largely become accustomed to paper currency for $1 transactions. Susan B. Anthony's portrait made the coin historically distinctive because she was the first woman to appear on a circulating United States coin. Her image faces right on the obverse, surrounded by the words Liberty and In God We Trust, while the reverse carries the familiar Apollo 11-inspired eagle landing on the moon, surrounded by stars, and the denomination $1. At first glance, it can look like nothing more than an oversized quarter, but that similarity is actually part of the story that makes the 1979 issue so fascinating. The coin was authorized in the late 1970s as the United States searched for a practical smaller dollar, and the mint produced enormous quantities during 1979. Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco all played roles in the year's production, creating different mint-marked and unmarked examples that collectors can separate with careful examination. The Philadelphia issue carries a small P mint mark near Anthony's shoulder, while Denver pieces display a D, and San Francisco examples were produced for collectors as well as circulation. The choice of Anthony was not accidental. Her long campaign for women's voting rights had made her one of the most recognizable figures in the history of American reform. Holding one of these coins, therefore, means holding an object connected not only to monetary history, but also to the evolving place of women in the national story. What makes 1979 especially intriguing is that the year contains several varieties that can transform an ordinary-looking dollar into something much more interesting. The most famous is the 1979 Philadelphia wide rim, sometimes called the near-date variety, where the date appears noticeably closer to the rim than on the more common narrow rim version. This difference can be subtle enough to escape a casual glance, yet important enough to make collectors reach for magnification and compare the spacing around the date. The distinction is not simply about whether a coin looks old or shiny. It is about the precise geometry of the design and how the dies were prepared. That is where the hunt begins, because a coin sitting unnoticed in a collection can sometimes contain a variety that its owner never realized was there. Then there is the story of the San Francisco mint mark, which gives 1979 another layer of intrigue. Some proof dollars from that year display the Type 2S mint mark, a clearer, more refined-looking punch that replaced the earlier style. Proof coins were specially struck for collectors, and the details can appear dramatically sharper than on ordinary circulation strikes. Under good lighting, the lettering, portrait, and mint mark can reveal tiny characteristics that are invisible when the coin is simply tossed into a drawer. For someone searching through inherited coins, old albums, or forgotten collections, recognizing these design differences can feel like discovering a hidden code written directly into the metal. But rarity is not created by a date alone, and this is where responsible collecting becomes essential. A 1979 Susan B. Anthony dollar is not automatically valuable simply because it is nearly half a century old, and most examples encountered in circulation are worth far less than sensational internet claims might suggest. What makes a particular specimen exciting is the combination of variety, condition, scarcity, demand, and authenticity. A heavily worn dollar with scratches, discoloration, or damage can tell an important story without necessarily carrying a spectacular market value, while a sharply preserved example with a recognized variety can attract considerably more attention. The difference between those two coins may be hiding in details so small that the naked eye barely notices them. Look closely at the metal itself, because color can provide clues, but it should never be treated as proof of rarity. The 1979 Susan B. Anthony dollar was made from a copper-nickel-clad composition, giving it a distinctive silvery appearance rather than the warm golden color associated with some later dollar coins. Tunning, environmental exposure, cleaning, chemical reactions, or unusual surface conditions can change that appearance dramatically. A strangely dark, yellowish, reddish, or unusually bright coin might look extraordinary, but appearance alone cannot establish a valuable mint error. Collectors should resist the temptation to polish or chemically clean a suspicious coin, because an attempt to make it look better can permanently damage the original surface and reduce its desirability. Weight is another clue worth examining, especially when an unusual coin appears in an old jar or inherited collection. A genuine 1979 dollar should fall within the expected specifications for its type, and a significant weight difference can raise questions about damage, alteration, composition, or a genuine minting anomaly. But a scale reading by itself does not turn a coin into a rare discovery. Dirt, corrosion, wear, edge damage, or even a poorly calibrated scale can create misleading results. The best approach is to weigh the coin using a reliable digital scale, compare the result with authoritative specifications, and then investigate other physical characteristics before drawing conclusions. The rim deserves just as much attention. Run your eyes around the edge and examine whether the rim is unusually broad, narrow, uneven, distorted, or sharply raised. A genuine mint error can sometimes produce an unusual edge or strike characteristic, but post-mint damage can create similar-looking effects. A coin dropped on a hard surface, squeezed by machinery, or damaged after leaving the mint may develop strange shapes that look dramatic under magnification. This is why experienced collectors look for consistency across the entire coin. They study the rim, fields, lettering, portrait, and devices together rather than declaring an error based on one strange mark. Strike alignment can provide another fascinating clue. Imagine holding the coin perfectly upright and then turning it over from top to bottom while keeping your fingers in the same orientation. If the reverse appears rotated relative to the obverse, that could warrant further investigation. A minor manufacturing variation is not automatically rare or valuable, and ordinary tolerance can exist in machine-made coins, but a substantial and authenticated die alignment error can be much more interesting to collectors. The key word is authenticated, because modern damage and accidental rotation can sometimes imitate a true mint-made error. A professional opinion can separate an exciting possibility from an ordinary damaged coin. Letter doubling is another feature that can send a collector's imagination into overdrive. Under magnification, examine the date, Liberty, in God we Trust, and other lettering for genuine separation between design elements. But be careful. Not every doubled-looking letter represents a valuable doubled die. Mechanical doubling, die deterioration, strike effects, and surface distortion can create appearances that resemble true hub or die doubling. The difference can be microscopic, which is precisely why photographs and casual comparisons are not always enough. If a 1979 dollar appears to show strong, unusual doubling, the responsible move is to document it carefully and seek evaluation from a recognized numismatic expert or professional grading service. Now the story reaches the moment every treasure hunter secretly imagines: the possibility that an ordinary-looking coin could become something far more important. Suppose a collector encounters a particularly unusual specimen, and professional examination confirms a recognized variety or significant mint-made anomaly. In an illustrative storytelling ladder, a minor but interesting variation might be imagined in the $2,500 to $3,500 range, depending entirely on authenticity, condition, rarity, and actual market demand. These figures are not promises or standard prices for ordinary 1979 dollars. They represent hypothetical outcomes for exceptional examples. For most people, even a few $1,000s would feel enormous, like discovering enough money for a meaningful down payment on a home hiding inside something that had been sitting unnoticed for years. Move one step higher in the ladder, and imagine a genuinely notable example attracting serious collector attention. In a hypothetical scenario, an exceptional specimen could be discussed around $9,000, while another high-grade example might reach an illustrative $5,000 level if its condition and characteristics supported that kind of demand. An unusual mint anomaly could be imagined around $6,000, while a rare collector piece might reach an illustrative $7,500. Again, these numbers are storytelling examples, not guaranteed valuations or claims that ordinary 1979 Susan B. Anthony dollars sell for these amounts. Real transactions depend on grading, certification, variety attribution, auction competition, provenance, and the specific characteristics of the individual coin. Continue climbing, and the possibilities become even more dramatic. An exceptionally preserved or genuinely uncommon specimen could be imagined around $8,000 in a hypothetical market scenario, while an unusual discovery with strong collector demand might reach an illustrative $8,500. At the top of this storytelling ladder, an extraordinary or historically significant example could be discussed at up to $9,000, but only as a hypothetical outcome requiring extraordinary circumstances. These figures should never be treated as a price guide for every 1979 dollar. The emotional power of the story comes from the possibility of discovery, not from assuming that every coin is secretly worth thousands. The real thrill is knowing that one unusual feature, if genuine and important enough, can completely change how collectors view a piece. And that is why the smartest search begins with patience rather than excitement. If you find a 1979 Susan B. Anthony dollar, do not clean it, scratch it, bend it, or attempt to enhance an apparent error. Photograph both sides under neutral lighting, record its weight with a reliable scale, inspect the color and surfaces, study the rim, check the date spacing, compare the mint mark, examine strike alignment, and use magnification to investigate any apparent doubling. Then compare your observations with trusted numismatic references, and when the coin appears genuinely unusual, seek professional authentication. A certified attribution can mean the difference between a fascinating curiosity and a documented collectible, while an unsupported claim can leave even a visually spectacular coin with little market credibility. Perhaps the most emotional part of this story is that the coin does not have to come from a glamorous auction room to become interesting. It could emerge from an inherited box, an old dresser drawer, a forgotten bank roll, a family collection, or a container of coins that has been untouched for decades. Somewhere, there may be a 1979 Susan B. Anthony dollar waiting for someone patient enough to notice the details that everyone else overlooked. But the real treasure is not simply the fantasy of sudden wealth. It is the connection between history, craftsmanship, human stories, and the possibility that an ordinary object can survive long enough to surprise another generation. One small dollar can carry the legacy of Susan B. Anthony, the ambitions of the United States Mint, the imperfections of mass production, and the excitement of modern collecting all at once. So before you dismiss that 1979 dollar as just another old coin, turn it slowly beneath the light and ask yourself what its surfaces are trying to reveal. Is the date positioned differently than expected? Does the mint mark match a recognized variety? Is the weight within specification? Does the rim show an authentic manufacturing characteristic? Is the strike properly aligned? Are those letters truly doubled, or are you seeing mechanical distortion? And most importantly, can a qualified professional verify what your eyes are telling you? Because the next coin you examine could be nothing more than a common survivor from a massive production year. Or it could contain the kind of unusual characteristic that makes collectors stop, look twice, and start asking questions. And somewhere in an everyday place, another seemingly ordinary coin may already be waiting to deliver an even more shocking surprise.